Vietnam, a Southeast Asian nation with a long history of struggles for independence. Cuba, a small island in the Caribbean renowned for the Revolution of 1959. Two countries, two hemispheres, two distinct ecosystems. And yet, for 65 years, they have maintained a diplomatic relationship regarded as an exception in international politics. No shared border, no large market to bind them, but a connection has endured, one that outlasted wars and crises. So, what has enabled these two distant nations to preserve such a strong friendship while many other alliances dissolved over time? In the historical context of the 20th century, the 1960s were a period of turbulence when nations around the world were reshaping their positions in the Cold War landscape. It was during this very time that Vietnam and Cuba laid the foundation for a special relationship, one that was both political, diplomatic, and a testament to solidarity between two people separated by half the globe. In 1960, the two nations officially established diplomatic relations. This was not merely a strategic decision, but also a symbol of shared ideals and common goals in the struggle for national independence and social justice. From that moment, their friendship began to be written with sweat, tears, and unshakable faith. On January 2, 1966, at José Martí Square in Havana, President Fidel Castro made a declaration that touched the world. For Vietnam, Cuba is ready to shed its own blood. That statement was not a slogan chanted in a festive atmosphere. It was a political and moral commitment imbued with symbolism and international responsibility. Later in September 1973, when Quang Tri still bore the scars of war, Fidel Castro once again reiterated this pledge, highlighting the steadfastness and sincerity of bilateral ties. Friendship did not stop at declarations. Cuba demonstrated its commitment through a series of concrete actions. Emergency aid. Cuba provided medicines, food supplies, and medical equipment during the periods when Vietnam was under blockade and fierce attacks. They sent doctors, engineers, and specialists to help with treatment, healthcare, and the restoration of infrastructure in war-torn areas. Fully aware of the dangers, they still volunteered, regarding it as a selfless and responsible international mission. A special diplomatic gesture. In 1969, Cuba opened an embassy in Tai Nina, a rare occurrence in international relations, demonstrating strong recognition and support for the Provisional Revolutionary Government of South Vietnam. The historic visit to Quang Tri in 1973, President Fidel Castro became the first and only head of state to visit Vietnam's liberated zone during the war. The image of him walking across makeshift bridges, stepping through areas still filled with the smell of gunpowder, came to be seen as the highest symbol of international solidarity of that era. Looking back at the period from 1960 to the mid-1970s, it is clear that Cuba's affection for Vietnam was not a matter of opportunistic diplomacy, but rather a bond between two nations sharing the aspiration for independence and the resilience to rise above historical pain. And from this foundation, their relationship would continue to grow, not only through aid, but also through comprehensive and long-term cooperation in the post-war period. As the smoke of war gradually faded, Vietnam entered the stage of national reconstruction with countless hardships, devastated infrastructure shortages in healthcare, and exhausted human resources. While much of the world remained hesitant toward a nation just emerging from conflict, Cuba once again demonstrated enduring affection, not through empty promises, but through concrete actions embodied in profoundly symbolic projects. One of the very first and most notable was the Vietnam-Cuba Friendship Hospital in Hanoi, inaugurated in 1969. At a time when the capital still struggled under bombings and blockade, this hospital became a place that saved thousands of patients, a symbol of life returning amid ruins. Generations of Vietnamese doctors were trained, worked, and matured here, carrying forward the borderless ideals of the first Cubans who ever placed their hands on an operating table in this distant land. Even today, the hospital remains one of the frontline medical facilities in the capital, holding both practical value and historical significance. Following that, the Vietnam-Cuba Friendship Hospital in Dong Hoi constructed between 1974 and 1981, stood as another testament to this special relationship. More than 100 Cuban engineers and workers directly participated in the building process. After completion, Cuba sent an additional 146 experts who continued to accompany the hospital for a decade, assisting in operations and training. This was not simply a matter of technology transfer, but a vivid expression of a deep bond, one that cannot be measured in economic terms. Alongside healthcare, Cuba also left a strong mark in infrastructure and socio-economic development. Many projects remain familiar to the Vietnamese people today. Thang Loi Hotel, a venue for numerous political and cultural events, contributing to promoting the nation's image during the early years of international integration. Luang Mai Poultry Farm and the Mok Chau, BRV Dairy Farms foundations for the livestock industry, providing modern technology and production models that helped improve agricultural life after the war. The Sun Tay, Gian Mai Road, affectionately called by the people the Cuba Road, it was not only a strategic transport route, but also a testament to Cuba's selfless sharing at a time when resources were extremely scarce. These projects not only met immediate needs, but also laid the foundation for long-term development, affirming Cuba's role as a companion during the Reconstruction period. Even after decades, these works still stand not only as infrastructure serving daily life, but also as witnesses of a historical era. They are symbols that remind later generations that international friendship can be built upon quiet contributions lasting far beyond any political declarations. It is from these foundations that Vietnam-Cuba relations entered a new phase, shifting from one-way aid to bilateral cooperation, sharing the challenges of peace with knowledge, inner strength, and affection that time cannot erode. When the gunfire ceased and Vietnam emerged from the flames of war, a new chapter in Vietnam-Cuba relations began. No longer was it about shipments of aid delivered amid falling bombs, but about handshakes to rebuild the future together. And in this context, the friendship once forged through hardship continued to be tested, this time by patience, loyalty, and trust in the enduring value of cooperation. The 1980s to the 1990s was a particularly significant period. Vietnam, newly reunified, was still struggling to revive its fragile economy. Meanwhile, Cuba began to face profound difficulties when the Soviet Union, its largest strategic partner, collapsed. Economic crisis, prolonged embargoes, and shifts in the global order pushed the Caribbean island nation into a historic period of trial. In that context, despite its own hardships, the government and people of Vietnam organized shipments of rice to Cuba, an essential and extremely precious commodity at the time. This act was not only humanitarian in value, but also carried deep political and diplomatic significance, expressing gratitude to a nation that had stood shoulder to shoulder during wartime, while also sending the message that their relationship endured not only in times of ease, but was further strengthened in times of difficulty. Entering the 21st century as globalization deepened, Vietnam and Cuba adjusted the mode of cooperation, shifting from aid to comprehensive collaboration across multiple fields: healthcare, education, agriculture, fisheries, biotechnology, and renewable energy. In agriculture, Vietnam shared its expertise in wet rice cultivation, one of its hallmark strengths, with its Cuban friends. Vietnamese agricultural experts worked directly in the fields alongside Cuban farmers, guiding them on seed selection, soil improvement, crop care, and harvest management. As a result, many farming regions in Cuba achieved higher yields, gradually reducing reliance on food imports and moving step by step toward agricultural self-sufficiency. In fisheries, the two sides cooperated to develop freshwater fish and marine shrimp farming models, creating additional livelihoods for Cuban communities and contributing to local economic development. At the same time, healthcare and biotechnology became highlights. Vietnam and Cuba jointly launched numerous cooperative programs in pharmaceutical and vaccine research and production, reaffirming both nations' role in contributing to public health. In particular, renewable energy projects, most notably the installation of solar power systems for schools in Cuba, carried strategic significance, aligning with the global trend of sustainable development and climate change response. This also stood as proof of the expansion of cooperation into fields tied to humanity's long-term needs. After more than half a century of close ties, Vietnam and Cuba have written a unique chapter in diplomatic history. These milestones are not confined to history books. They continue to be nurtured through humanitarian initiatives in the present. One of the most notable activities is the program 65 Years of Vietnam Loves Cuba, scheduled to take place from October 13 to October 16, 2025. Launched to mark the 65th anniversary of the establishment of diplomatic relations, 1960 to 2025. The program is not merely a ceremonial commemoration. It is a large-scale humanitarian campaign that reflects the goodwill of the Vietnamese people toward their Cuban friends who are facing countless challenges: food shortages, lack of medicines, droughts, natural disasters, and the lasting impacts of economic embargoes. Remarkably, in just the first few days after its launch, the campaign spread beyond expectations, attracting more than 1.69 million participants and raising over $13.1 million USD, far surpassing the original goal of $2.65 million USD. This is not just a number, but a clear testament to the power of solidarity to loyalty, and to the enduring bond between the two nations in an international climate still rife with uncertainties. The theme of the program was built around the number 65, not only as a milestone of time, but also as a concrete commitment to action, providing urgent support for the Cuban people in essential areas such as food, medicine, and daily necessities, while also implementing sustainable humanitarian projects such as hospital renovations, clean energy supply, and improvements to community living conditions. What is remarkable here is that the program places no limits on who can participate. Everyone from students and ordinary citizens to businesses, social organizations overseas, Vietnamese, and even foreigners living in Vietnam can contribute their small part to this greater journey, whether it be a bag of rice, a box of medicine, a financial donation, or simply a message of encouragement sent to the Cuban people. Each is a brick helping to build the bridge of compassion. Few campaigns have ever combined all the elements of history, emotion, action, and future so completely. This is not only the event of one nation expressing gratitude to an old friend, but also a message to the younger generation that kindness does not wait for wealth and gratitude is the most enduring value between people. In the modern world, international relations are often shaped by strategic interests, power balances, or specific economic goals. Yet within this landscape, there exists a rare exception: the Vietnam-Cuba friendship. It is one of the few relationships not built upon calculations of benefit, but nurtured by trust, empathy, and genuine affection. Vietnam and Cuba do not share a border, nor do they share a common language, culture, or religion. Economically, neither country is a key trading partner of the other. However, during the critical historical moments of the 20th century, when both nations faced existential struggles, they discovered mutual understanding. It was the shared aspiration for independence, resilient spirit, and belief in justice that formed the first bond linking these two distant countries across continents. Unlike relationships shaped by trade agreements or political commitments, Vietnam and Cuba have stood together through concrete actions. When Vietnam was engulfed in the flames of war, Cuba provided aid without expecting repayment. And when Cuba fell into economic crisis, Vietnam, despite its own hardships, sent ships loaded with rice as a gesture of solidarity. Such support was altruistic, rising above political calculations, affirming that this is one of the rare relationships sustained by morality and loyalty. Additionally, there is a foundational element that keeps this relationship strong: bamboo diplomacy, a concept describing Vietnam's diplomatic style. Firm in principle, flexible in approach, yet steadfast in core values. This is how Vietnam has maintained balance in its international relations. Thanks to this, the friendship with Cuba has not been swept away by geopolitical maneuverings, but preserved on the basis of faithfulness and mutual trust. For more than 60 years, despite global geopolitical upheavals, this relationship has remained stable. The projects in Vietnam bearing Cuba's name from hospitals and hotels to roads are not merely physical infrastructure, but living evidence of trust and loyalty, spanning generations of leaders and citizens of both nations. This is a distinctive feature when compared to many international alliances that often shift with the tides of circumstance. The Vietnam-Cuba relationship exists as a rare phenomenon in modern diplomacy lasting for decades, independent of geography or economic power. It demonstrates how shared historical values and solidarity in times of crisis can shape a lasting bond that transcends the changes of time. While many international alliances once considered pillars of the 20th century, from the Warsaw Pact and CTO to numerous multilateral trade agreements, have dissolved or transformed according to shifting interests, the Vietnam-Cuba friendship has remained steadfast, becoming a rare exception in the history of international relations. The 65th anniversary celebration also poses a new challenge. How can a friendship once rooted in wartime solidarity and aid continue to thrive in today's context of pragmatic cooperation? Share your thoughts in the comments below. And don't forget to subscribe and follow the channel to discover more fascinating international stories.